Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's great to see everybody here. I think we've got everybody in from the waiting room. So let me jump in. First of all, thank you all for being here. For those who may not know me, I'm Andrew Guzman. I'm the Dean of the USC Gould School of Law. And it's really a treat for me to be here today for our event. Every job has good parts and bad parts. And this is just way up at the top of good parts for my job. It's been a highlight in my week, in my calendar for the week, and I'm so delighted it's here. So today we have the great privilege of celebrating a couple of historic milestones. The one, the 100 years of women's suffrage, 120 years since the founding of the law school, and the one that I'm most interested in, the centennial of one of our most cherished alumna, Ruth Levine. Before I get into that, I want to thank a few people: the Women's Law Association, the Jewish Law Student Association, the Gould Development Alumni Relations Office, all of whom have really been important to putting this together. Ruth's important enough that without at least 3 organizations putting an effort to organize it, it doesn't get done. I also want to thank the events office at the law school, who are just always behind the scenes making these sorts of events work, and they're just terrific, so thank you to them. Next on my list of people I'm happy to thank, some of our alumni who are here: Yvonne Braithwaite-Burke, Allison Parker, Shannon Raj Singh. Thank you all for being here for this conversation, for joining us. And of course, Ruth Levine. I'm so happy, and we are also happy to host the celebration, Ruth. It was postponed from its originally in-person scheduled date in March. Needless to say, that was a necessary decision, but I'm so glad we're able to do it in this format. Not as good as in person, but really happy to do it. So I do want to take the opportunity. One of the many reasons I've been looking forward to this is it gives me an opportunity to brag about the law school in a way that will make the people in this room happy. So it's just a happy kind of thing. As I mentioned, we're 120 years old as an institution. And the law school has done a lot of things about which we are justifiably proud. We were one of the pioneers of the interdisciplinary study of law. We were one of the pioneers of introducing clinical education, both things that have now become present in just about every law school. Our faculty have always and continue to do really important legal scholarship that changes the way we think about law and legal questions. And of course, our students who become our alumni go on to lead incredible lives with fantastic careers, changing their communities and the world around them. And through that 120 years in which we've done those things and many others, women have always been part of the picture. And that's, as you all know, not something that every law school can say. And identifying milestones is not the only way to identify what's going on, but it's a useful marker of some kind. So I can't resist sharing a few of ours. So in 1911, so what is that, 109 years ago, USC Gould, obviously not named at the time, launched the nation's first women's law student sorority, Phi Delta Delta. And as I like to point out to people whenever I raise this point, you can't have a sorority unless you have more than one woman. So even in 1911, women were present in our class. In the 1930s, the Law Review named Harriet Geary as its first female editor-in-chief. By way of comparison, the law school I attended had a first female editor-in-chief who is currently a member of the USC Gould faculty and held that position of editor-in-chief in 1977. So a little bit of a gap there. In the 1960s, the late 1960s, USC Gould became the first ABA-accredited law school in the country to appoint a female dean. And that's, of course, Dorothy Nelson, who not only was dean, but was an enormously important dean whose actions as dean to this day shape who we are and remains a close friend of the law school. And then moving ahead, fast forwarding to today, this year, our 1L class this year has the largest percentage of women in the history of the law school, which is 59% of our first year class is female. So, this is one of the features of our law school about which we are all rightfully proud. And so the opportunity to note those things in this context where we're celebrating both Ruth and suffrage is a treat. My job, other than that, is just to introduce our main facilitator today, Shohoi Reed. Shohoi is a director of development at the law school. She previously served 10 years as the chief admission officer for the law school. She has a very long and rich career in legal education, including working at the Law School Admissions Council, or LSAC. And so, Shohoi, I am delighted to hand you the virtual microphone. They are all yours.
Perfect. Thank you, Dean Guzman. I'd like to welcome everyone here today, our faculty, staff, students, special friends, and family of Ruth. And I'd also like to welcome our speakers, Supervisor Burke, Allison Parker, Shannon, and our dear, dear friend, Ruth Levine, for being here. Today, we're here to honor, recognize, and certainly celebrate these 4 women and all the women who have come through our doors in the 120-year history of Gould. I've had the distinct honor and privilege to know each of these women firsthand. Supervisor Burke and I met about 30 years ago when I was a sophomore in college. She came to my college to speak as the first Black female congresswoman from California. I was so in awe of her, as I had the privilege to introduce her to our student body. Little did I realize that our paths would cross again all these years later. As Dean of Admissions, I admitted both Allison Parker and Shannon Raj Singh to the law school about 10 years ago. And while I remember a number of students that I've admitted over the years, I can honestly say that I distinctly remember these 2 women. Allie was passionate for her Boston Red Sox, and Shannon was passionate for wanting to work with Hannah Gary and the Human Rights Clinic at the law school. It's been a treat and a joy to see both of these women grow and become the lawyers that they are today. And then lastly, I've had a distinct honor to know Mrs. Ruth Levine these last 5 years. Her sense of humor and her laughter are infectious. She's sharp as a tack, humble, wise, and certainly has opinions about a lot of things. I've enjoyed learning about her personal story and hearing the many stories about our university, Los Angeles, and CNN politics. Ruth has seen a lot during her lifetime, and I'm reminded of one shared moment a few years back. One afternoon, I called and I invited her to have lunch at the Jonathan Club with the dean and me. There was a slight pause, and then she said, "Now, will they let us go in from the front door?" Being from the South, I knew exactly what she was referencing. I immediately said yes, and then she told me, well, you know, the last time she had been to the club, the women had to enter the building from the alleyway in the back door. We've certainly come a long way since that time, Ruth. Okay, so let's get on with the program. I'm going to be the moderator today with the help of the leadership from the Women's Law Association and the Jewish Law Student Association. Both organizations will give some brief greetings, and then we're going to start with each woman sharing a few words. Then we'll have some Q&A from our student moderators. Finally, we'll use the last 20 minutes for questions from the audience through the chat feature. I'll be monitoring those questions and will fill them to the panelists. So if you're wanting to ask a question, please send it directly to me, again, in the chat field. So with that, I'd like to first introduce 2L Sam Dyer, co-president of the Women's Law Association, and she'll be followed by 2L Paul Schumann, co-president of the Jewish Law Student Association. Enjoy, everyone.
Thank you, Dean Reed, and hello, everyone. On behalf of the Women's Law Association, I want to welcome you all to today's program, and to echo the sentiments of both Dean Guzman and Dean Reed, I want to thank you for joining us and helping to celebrate the accomplishments of our own esteemed alumna, Ruth Levine. We also wanted to quickly thank Ruth for her contributions at Gould and in the legal community, her family for making this event a reality, and our other guest speakers, Supervisor Braithwaite Burke, Allison Parker, and Shannon Raj Singh, for attending and sharing their own experiences as women in the law. The Women's Law Association exists at Gould to support the advancement of women in the legal community and society at large by providing resources, networking opportunities, and support to Gould students. Today, we are excited to learn more about how these incredible women, Ms. Lavine, Supervisor Burke, Allison, and Shannon, have advanced the opportunities for women in the law as pioneers in their own right. We are also here today to celebrate the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, and we urge you all to use this right and privilege to vote. To honor all the women who have fought so hard for voices to be heard, we have an obligation to use our voices, especially now. We would now like to turn it over to the Jewish Law Students Association to introduce themselves and our guest of honor, Ruth.
Everyone, my name is Paul Schumann. I'm currently the co-president of the Jewish Law Students Association here at Gould. Just wanted to thank Dean Reed for the introduction, everyone for coming today, Sam for putting everything together for the Women's Law Association. This is going to be an amazing event. Just a little background on JLSA. We serve as a spiritual, academic, and social resource for the Jewish student body at USC. Our group really prides itself on bringing people from a variety of backgrounds together to celebrate Jewish culture and heritage. Our main goal is to give all students at Gould a sense of community and security, especially in a time like today, where unrest and division can really instill a lot of anger and fear in many young adults. It is events such as these which remind us who we are, where we came from, and why it's important to cherish the moment and what we have, which leads me to introduce our guest of honor today. With us today, we have an incredible woman, Miss Ruth Levine. Miss Levine is a double Trojan and graduated from USC Law School in 1943. Miss Levine grew up in Germany and left her native country on April 1st, 1933, just 2 months after Hitler had become chancellor. She fled to Holland and then England and stayed in Europe until 1938 when her family moved to Los Angeles. It was there that she attended USC Law, albeit at a time when men and women had separate gathering places, and her class consisted of only 5 women. After graduating from USC Law, Ms. Levine worked in probate and estate planning, one of the few fields available to female lawyers at the time. She continued working as an attorney until 1990, but still maintains her bar membership to this day. Ms. Levine has also set up a scholarship to help the next generation of Gould students pay for legal education. This year, Ms. Levine celebrates her 100th birthday, and it is an honor to have her here with us today. And from there, I'm going to hand it off to our guest of honor, Ruth Levine.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. And all you lovely people who are so smart that you know how to work Zoom. That's something I will never learn, but obviously there are enough so we can have this lovely celebration. And thank you particularly to Chihuahua to help with this event, together with my daughter, Kathy. I really appreciate all this. You can't believe it for an old lady to have all this excitement. USC and USC Law School have played a very important role in my life. And when I came to Los Angeles, ready to go to college, I had heard that I had choices, and I picked the right one for me. And of course, I met my husband, Richard Lavine, at USC Law School. So this is all very special. Much has been made about the fact that I went to law school at a time when most women did not pursue a professional career. That was not true in my family. My younger sister also graduated from USC Law School, passing the bar, and worked for the courts. My mother was a Red Cross nurse in World War I, and she somehow survived what they then called the Spanish flu. So I chose my mother well because she had a lot of longevity also. I graduated from law school at a time when it was very difficult for women to find jobs. You didn't dare say that you could type, or you would find you would end up in a secretarial position. When I returned to the practice of law after a number of years, I was helped by my friend and USC Law School graduate, Bob Thompson. Bob later became a professor at USC Law School. and he welcomed me into a law firm with other USC Law School graduates, which included Lachlan Waters. That's probably not a name that you would remember, but he was U.S. attorney at one point and also became a judge. So over the years, I was able to balance a law practice and with also other leadership activities in many law-related organizations and non-law organizations. I was able to balance them with a marriage, children, grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren. My oldest great-grandchild is in his first year in college. And yes, we traveled the world along the way, so sometimes with the International Churchill Society. I've been able to see many changes for women in the law, more women in law schools, law firms, the judiciary, and I would be nice to think that I've contributed in a modest way to those changes. So my advice is try to maintain a balance, pick good partners and mentors, and don't forget to vote. What happened to my ballot? So that's it.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Levine, for those comments. For the next portion of today's program, we have the opportunity to hear more about Mrs. Levine's experience growing up in Germany, attending law school, and excelling in the legal field. Mrs. Levine wanted to ensure that she was able to fully answer all of these questions, so she provided her answers in advance of today's event. To make this easier for her, my co-president, Sam, and I are going to be reading both the questions and the answers for her Q&A. I'll be providing the questions and then Sam will respond with the answers that Ruth has provided. The first question we have is, what was it like growing up in Germany in the 1920s and 30s? And can you tell us about your experience leaving Germany in 1933? Was it a culture shock to come to the United States?
And Mrs. Levine responds, my early life was in Hamburg, Germany. We started in the first grade at a private girls' school and then went for 3 years to a public school. We went to a Jewish Sunday school on the weekend. Because of my father's business, we had many foreign visitors, and I learned songs from the various countries. We voted on Sundays, and I always voted with my parents.
Larry's girlfriend. She was at Poochie's.
In January of 1933, Hitler came to power. My father was on a business trip to the US, but in March, he sent my mother to a telegram instructing her to take the 2 girls to go to England. We were off in 2 days. I remember on the way to the train station seeing signs telling people not to frequent shops owned by Jews. Once we got to England, my mother found us a boarding school called the Hamilton House. There were other girls whose fathers were diplomats, so many parents were abroad. My parents moved to Holland to make it easier for my father to go to the continent for work. I graduated from school at age 16. Then, if you wanted to go to the university, you had to study and take exams. I was accepted to Oxford, but unfortunately could not attend because in 1938, my father decided it was time for us all to leave Europe and he wasn't going to leave me behind. We sailed from Liverpool to New York, where the Statue of Liberty was a wonderful sight. We traveled from New York to California and then ended up in Los Angeles, where we had friends. The only culture shock in coming from the States was the difference in English pronunciation since my secondary education was in England.
The next question is, I understand that you were a double Trojan. What made you want to come to USC and what made you want to attend law school?
Mrs. Levine responds, I had heard that there were 2 universities in Los Angeles. I went first to USC and they accepted my transcripts and I never looked back. After that, I wanted to attend a professional school and didn't want to be a doctor or a teacher, so I went to law school. And USC was the best accredited law school in Los Angeles at the time.
Who was your favorite professor in law school?
Ruth's favorite professor was Professor William Burby, who taught real estate law. She loved law school even though the work was hard.
And we believe that Professor William Burby's grandson, Mike, might be in the audience today. The next question is, what groups were you involved with in law school, and was it difficult being a Jewish woman in law school at that time?
Mrs. Levine writes, I didn't belong to any groups because the only legal sorority would not allow Jews. That was the only discrimination I was aware of. I met my husband, Richard Levine, in law school, and he was a year ahead of me.
I understand that you met your husband in law school. Can you tell us the story of how you met?
Mrs. Levine writes, "We met in the library when he came over and asked me about a book I was reading. At that time, all the students at USC and USC Law School were almost all from Los Angeles. Now students come from all over the country and the world."
When you graduated, there were very few women in the legal profession. How did you get your first job, and how did you come to practice probate and estate law?
I worked right out after law school as a clerk, but after a few years at home, my friend and law school classmate Bob Thompson called and asked me to work for his law firm, Thompson, Royston, and Moss, all of whom were USC Law School grads. He asked me to work on some of the estates they had at the firm. Before that, I had done some estate law for relatives. From then on, that was my practice of law.
What prompted you to create a scholarship fund for USC students?
I created the USC Law School Scholarship Fund after my husband died. I wanted to give the law school, and then Dean Scott Bice suggested that this was a great need, especially with the increase in tuition for law school. I've enjoyed that giving and have gotten to know some of the scholarship recipients.
We understand that some of the scholarship recipients may be here today. If so, we would really appreciate if you would leave your name in the chat. The next question is, you have lived in LA for most of your life now. What are your favorite parts of LA, and what have you seen change?
Mrs. Levine writes, "Los Angeles is a much different city from when I arrived. Aside from the obvious traffic, the city has become a culture capital. From our fine museums and the symphony, opera, and other cultural institutions, we have become a cultural go-to place. In addition, the city has become very diverse and multicultural, which is exciting."
We are now days away from the election. Will you be voting? And if so, why do you vote?
Mrs. Levine writes, "You asked me about voting since we're close to the election. I've already voted, and I've never missed an election. When we lived in Germany in the early 50s, when my husband was in the Air Force, we voted. As I mentioned, I voted with my parents in Germany, and I've passed along that tradition to my children, grandchildren, and to my 19-year-old great-grandson, who is voting in his first presidential election."
Our last question is, what advice do you have for women entering the legal field today?
My advice for women entering the legal field is to work in a place, whether it be a governmental agency or a law firm, where you can have mentors to help you develop good habits and learn how to practice law.
We would like to thank Ruth for providing these answers in advance, and we'll now introduce the rest of our panelists.
So I will be starting first, and I would like to introduce the first of our guest panelists, Supervisor Burke. Supervisor Burke has served the community in a number of roles. She has served 4 terms on the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors and Los Angeles Metro, serving as chair of the Board of Metro in 2005. She was appointed by Speaker Nancy Pelosi to the 6-member Committee on Congressional Ethics in July 2008. In 2012, President Obama appointed her to be on the board of the National Railroad Passenger Corporation, and she was confirmed by the Senate in 2013. She also serves on the board of directors in California Transportation Commission, LA 84, and Century Housing. She is a mediator and arbitrator with ARC, AAA, and FINRA. As a product of the Los Angeles Unified School District, Supervisor Burke attended Manual Arts High School, where she developed her interest in public speaking by joining the Oratory Society and participating in citywide competitions. Her numerous extracurricular activities helped to earn her scholarship from the University of California, Berkeley, and she received a BA degree from the University of California, Los Angeles. She received her JD from USC Gould in 1956. During this era, many private law firms showed no interest in hiring women. She worked as a deputy commissioner and later had her own law firm. She became the first African-American woman elected to the U.S. Congress from California in 1972, representing California's 37th district. She was selected to serve as vice chair of the 1972 Democratic National Convention in Miami and later on the House Select Committee on Assassinations. In 1973, she became the first member of Congress to give birth while in office. She did not seek re-election to Congress in 1978 and instead she ran for Attorney General of California. She became a public finance and real estate attorney with various firms, and from 1987 to 1993 was a partner in the firm Jones Day, Ravis and Pogue. In 1984, she was selected to serve as vice chairman of the U.S. Olympics Organizing Committee and served as chair of the Los Angeles branch of the Federal Reserve Board and a regent of the University of California before becoming the first African American elected to the LA County Board of Supervisors in 1992. She served on the board of Ford Foundation and Educational Testing. She has an honorary doctorate degrees from both Pepperdine University and Virginia State University. As a Los Angeles County Supervisor, she represented nearly 2.5 million residents in the nation's largest county. Her efforts focused on improving the lives of children, economic development, and improving transportation. Her unused campaign funds were donated to the Burke Education and Policy Foundation that has provided over $300,000 in scholarships for Los Angeles college students. She is married to Los Angeles businessman Dr. William Burke, and they have 2 daughters, Autumn and Christine. Welcome, Supervisor Burke, and thank you so much for being here today. We welcome you to take a few minutes to speak further about your experience before we introduce the next guest panelist.
Thank you very much. And it certainly is my pleasure to first of all say to Ruth, congratulations on all of the life you've led. That's an inspiration to all of us. We get such inspiration from the fact that you have moved throughout this world and have come to Los Angeles and made such a tremendous contribution. My experience at USC, I have to say, is I was the second African-American woman who attended the law school. The first was Helen Riddle in 1928. I was the second one. She never practiced law, but it was my fortunate opportunity to have so many chances, not only as a practicing lawyer, but in government. My first experience in government was that I was appointed to the Corporation Commission of the state of California after taking an exam for civil service. And when I was appointed there, it was not with great acclaim. It was a matter that they said, okay, we will appoint you. But I had a wonderful superintendent of Corporations Commission who gave me every opportunity. I guess I really have been very fortunate that I've had an opportunity to do things that maybe women in the past did not have those doors open to them. Starting with the California legislature. I was the first African-American woman elected to the California legislature. And now as I look back, I see so many women making great contributions. Again, when I went to Congress, I was the first African-American woman elected from California. And there, at the time, there were very few women who served in Congress. In total, there were 19 women. Today, it's almost half women who are serving in the United States House of Representatives. I also was very fortunate when I was first appointed to the Board of Supervisors of Los Angeles County, becoming the first woman and the first African-American appointed. I was appointed by Governor Jerry Brown, who had confidence in me. Unfortunately, I was not elected, but later, many years later, I did run and served for 16 years on the Board of Supervisors. I like to say one thing to women who are looking at law as a career. Take law and make it into whatever you'd like it to be. You have a chance to take the law and move into so many directions, to have an aggressive opportunity to help people, to change things, to arrive at a new society. I believe law offers not only the chance to change laws, make laws, but also to apply them in such a way that they give greater opportunities to generations of women and minorities, that they're able to contribute. You know, it's a matter that the contributions made by women, by minorities, they make our life greater. It creates a different environment, and it makes it so much better for so many other people, not just us. So I say to women who are looking at law, you may want to be in a law firm, and they're great opportunities. I served in one of the largest law firms in the United States. Obviously, I was one of the first women to become a partner in Jones Day. And I'm not going to say when you do these things, it's all smooth sailing. Don't expect it to be totally smooth sailing. But if you can take on a challenge and if you can make life better for someone else, it's amazing. Once you do it, it opens the doors for so many others. Law offers a great opportunity, not only in terms of your own development and your ability to change the way of life of so many others and change our society. But what I say is don't be afraid. Don't step back. Don't be afraid to speak. I notice now, even after all of these years, I may be on a board, and when I speak, everybody gets very quiet. They're afraid, I guess, of what I'm going to say and whether I'm going to offend someone. But the important thing is to speak up, take on challenges, and you're going to a marvelous law school that provides you with a background that you're able to move into whatever arena or field that you want to. And it never stops. Today, years later, I'm an arbitrator and I'm doing new things, and we never stop because we have a challenge and we have an opportunity. And thank you for giving me a chance to just express some of my concerns and all my opportunities that I was able to enjoy, and hopefully that many students at USC will also.
Thank you so much for your inspirational comments, Supervisor Burke. I would now like to introduce our next panelist, Allison Parker. Allie Parker is an attorney with the California Department of Justice, where she represents the state in litigation related to health, education, and welfare policy and matters. She also serves as treasurer of the Board of Immigrant Defenders Law Council and volunteers as a rape crisis counselor. Before Allie joined the government, she spent 6 years in private practice in Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman's Los Angeles office. In that role, she represented clients in general commercial litigation and corporate policyholders in insurance coverage disputes. Allie was also involved in a variety of pro bono projects. For this work and for her work at MDEF's inaugural board, she was honored at the 2016 Pro Bono Attorney of the Year by USC Gould's Public Interest Law Foundation. Allie also practiced law for 2 years in Tokyo, Japan, as in-house counsel for a leading international chemical company. In Tokyo, she held leadership positions on the board of the Japan In-House Counsel Network and the Women in Business Committee of the American Chamber of Commerce in Japan. During law school at USC, Allie served as the Student Bar Association president and gave her class commencement address about the Boston Red Sox. She also founded the Crosstown Pro Bono Challenge, a competition between USC and UCLA law schools to determine which school could engage more students in pro bono work. Welcome, Allison, and thank you so much for being here today. I'd like to take this as an opportunity for you to share a little bit more about your background and some introductory remarks before we introduce our final panelist.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Dean Guzman and Dean Reed, for the intro. Thank you to the WLA, the JLSA, and Miss Lavine. I'm so honored to be on this panel. Supervisor Burke, I'm also so honored to be on this panel with you. And I've been so inspired by your stories. I've really enjoyed reading about you in the past couple of days. Miss Lavine, I think your immigration story is incredibly inspiring and relevant today, and I'm so happy that we got to hear it. And Supervisor Burke, your pioneering work is incredibly impressive, and I'm so glad that we're able to hear more about your advice and your opinions, and I just have you here today. If there are any Los Angeles Dodgers fans on the call, I think I would be remiss not to say congratulations. I am from Boston, so you're welcome for Mookie Betts, Joe Kelly, one of the most entertaining baseball players to date, and Dave Roberts, who holds a very special place in my heart. And that segues into what I wanted to talk about instead of about myself. You guys heard a little bit about what I did, but I'd like to talk about a couple women that I thought of when I was reading about Supervisor Burke and Miss Lavine. And those people, I'll start with my Nana. My Nana is the biggest Boston Red Sox fan in the entire world. She's blind, she's 93, but she listens to every darn Sox game on the radio. And that's why I love the Red Sox as much as I do, because we listened to it together when I was growing up. Now, my Nana went blind in her 30s, but that did not stop her from having 9 children. And her hobby was free ocean swimming, which I find horrifying and I can see. So yeah, she's an amazing person, a force of nature. She's still very involved in local politics. And she gave birth to my mother, for which I'm very thankful. So my mom's my second person I'd like to talk about. My mom raised 3 kids as a single mom. And while she was doing that, she was also in school, getting her degree so she could be a therapist. And I thought it was totally normal that every night before you take a test, you stay up and you prepare all night by, doing notes on legal pads. She had yellow legal pads filled with notes every night before a test. And she got straight A's. If she got anything less than an A, she was extremely disappointed. So this is the world I grew up in. I thought that was totally normal, that, she would work a full-time day as a social worker, for the state of Massachusetts, helping people with the really vulnerable communities, doing really tired, work that's tiring and maybe mentally draining. And then she would come home and do this second job. And so she taught me the value of hard work. And I think that that's been incredibly beneficial to my career as an attorney. And then I said my mom was single because my dad passed away when I was very young. And his sister, my Aunt Ginny, came into my life and kind of acted as a surrogate mom and to represent his side of the family at that point. And she was incredibly influential to me. She's very religious. And she worked as a Jesuit. And so she traveled the world helping people. She was a teacher as well, a high school teacher. And in her retirement, she's volunteered with prison ministry. So she goes into prisons and talks to prisoners about their faith. And she's just an incredible force of nature, like my mom and my Nana as well. And in the recent years, she's also become a big immigration advocate. And she's really been supportive of me with my work with Immigrant Defenders Law Center. So I was able to stand on the shoulders of those 3 women. And in going to USC, I was able to connect with alumni and teachers and professors and staff. And I've just been so honored to be asked to be on this panel and to be able to connect with Supervisor Burke, Miss Lavine, and to also be able to see Shannon again, who was one of my absolute favorite people in law school. And I can't wait to hear about The Hague and all your time traveling. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ms. Parker. So lastly, I would like to introduce our panelist, Shannon Raj Singh. Shannon is an attorney specialized in international criminal law, the intersection of technology and human rights, and the prevention of mass atrocities. She recently joined Twitter as its Human Rights Council, where she advises on both negative and positive human rights implications of the technology. She is also a member of Guernica 37 International Justice Chambers and an officer of the War Crimes Committee of the International Bar Association. Until recently, Shannon was based in The Hague, where she was an associate legal officer at the Special Tribunal for Lebanon, advising the Appeals Chamber and the Office of the President on the world's first terrorism case before an international criminal tribunal. She was also a visiting fellow of practice at Oxford University, where she helped conceptualize a transatlantic atrocity prevention network with the Blavatnik School of Government's program on international peace and security. Previously, she was a litigator in San Francisco, where she focused her practice on international investigations under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. In addition, Shannon has clerked for a federal judge at the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California and has interned with the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, the U.S. Mission to the UN, and South Africa's Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. She holds a JD from USC Gould School of Law, as well as a bachelor's in political science and economics from UCLA. Welcome, Shannon. Could you share with us briefly a bit more about your background?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for having me. I share Allie's excitement. It is truly such an honor to be here speaking alongside Ruth and all of the other really, truly remarkable women here on the panel. So I have to say, I never thought that I would join a tech company or even be in-house counsel. As Dean Reed said, my drive and interest has really always been in international human rights and criminal law. And along the way, I developed a very niche and perhaps somewhat grim interest in the prevention of mass atrocities. So genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, all the cheerful stuff. And I'm really as surprised as anyone that this interest has recently taken me to Twitter, where I've recently started a new role as Human Rights Counsel, because until very recently, I've been based in The Hague at the International Criminal Tribunals there. But the way that I've tried to think about my career, which is really far from linear, is just to try to think about opportunities for impact. And right now, I've been really astounded by the impact that technology companies can have and are having on conflict and human rights situations all around the world. These companies are more powerful than many countries, and so I'm simultaneously impressed and sometimes a little disturbed by their reach and their impact. And right now I'm trying to bring this lens of international human rights and atrocity prevention to Twitter, particularly as it looks to, expand into higher risk markets and places with vulnerable ethnic and religious minorities and sensitive groups. And it's a role that's never existed before. So I join just one other female lawyer on the team, and everything that we're trying to do and trying to build there is brand new, and I'm happy to talk about that more at any point. But when I was reflecting on this event and what it must have been like for Ruth to be one of just 5 female law students in her class, I kept thinking back to a moment when I was in law school. And I was out for drinks with a good friend, another female USC law student, and a couple of guys were talking to us at a bar. And they asked what we did, and they said they were really surprised. They said they were shocked to hear that we were law students because they said we certainly didn't look like lawyers. And I think they were actually trying to compliment us, but I can't tell you how much I internalized this message and how much it really upset me. Because here I was studying night and day, as a law student and trying to get the right internships and distinguish myself. And this idea that I wasn't fitting the part, I think really put its hooks deep in me. And it became this concern of mine that has, pervaded, I think, my career, that this was somehow how people were seeing me, how my colleagues were referring to me behind closed doors. And for a long time, I really went to lengths to try to look the part, to try to, fit the stereotype so that I would be taken seriously as an attorney, not only in my appearance, but in my demeanor and in my credentials and in every way to try to be taken seriously. And I think I've always been worried that I look, too young or too feminine if I wear a certain thing, and I have to admit that I started, this recent role. I'm currently pregnant with my second child. And I would remember being so grateful that I was starting the role on Zoom because, again, I was so worried that I would somehow not be taken seriously in my position because of my sex. So I really have to hand it to Ruth and to Yvonne and express my gratitude to them today, because it's really because of women like these that I think have broadened our societal understanding of what it is to be a lawyer and what it looks like. And I think that to the extent that any of us are, pioneering in any way in our respective areas of law, it's because of, some woman like Ruth had the audacity to think of herself as a lawyer and picture herself in a role that she hadn't been in before. And in some ways, I think I may have had it the easiest because I ultimately chose international law. And that's an area where I think diversity is really prized. They're actively looking for different cultural backgrounds, different linguistic skills, or, different domestic legal systems and viewpoints. And that ultimately became an area that I felt very at home in and comfortable in. It's an area where I think change is the norm and thinking outside the box is welcomed, perhaps more than other areas of law. And for that reason, I really would encourage young women today to consider it as an area that would particularly, benefit from your skills and perspectives and insights. But I think all of us here today just owe a huge debt of gratitude to Ruth and Yvonne and so many others for breaking these molds for us as to what it looks like to be a lawyer. And I just am very honored to be here.
Wow, thank you so much, Shannon. And thank you again to all of our panelists for being here today. So now we have a couple questions for all of you. The first question is, What has law school taught you, and how has that shaped your worldview? So I think we'll start with Supervisor Burke, if you would like to respond to the question first. Oh, I think you might be muted. I'm sorry.
USC was a great experience for me because, of course, even when I was there, there were just very few women, and we only had 6 women in my class. There was only a class of 60. What law school really taught me was that part of our experience is to educate those people around us, educate those people who were future lawyers, that they didn't all look the same, that their backgrounds were not all the same. So I think that part of it is an educational responsibility. When I had my child, when I was a member of Congress, I was the first member of Congress to have a baby. And it was an educational experience for those I worked with. The men in Congress didn't think about the fact that a woman could be a member of Congress, do her job as well as anyone else, stand on the floor of the House and debate an issue and still be a woman who had a child. So I think that part of our challenge, even today, is to be able to educate the world that there is such a need for different approaches to issues. And whether we like it or not, women bring a different approach to many issues around us. You know, it's a matter that everyone doesn't have to go to the supermarket, but those of us who go come away with an experience, and we educate those people around us as we look at prices, as we look at what is offered to society. So I see our role as educating the world to the fact that, to the degree we don't have women who are president of the United States, who are international leaders, it is our loss. There's such a need for a diversity of not only of people in terms of their ethnicity, but also whether we have women as well as men directing those major issues of our world. And Ruth is such an example of how, even many years ago, it was the step that was taken by a woman like her that made a difference in terms of the education of people around us to the fact of the contributions that we can make. So I say, don't be afraid to take on the tough job. Do it.
Wonderful words. Thank you so much. Ms. Parker, would you like to go next?
Sure. I had a great time in law school. I loved it, but I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I think that the thing that I remember most from law school is being struck by how inaccessible the law is to most people. I realized how many procedural hurdles there were, how many obstacles there are to access to justice. And I remember being really, really just kind of overwhelmed and dispirited by that because, you know, so my friend just showed me a children's book, and it's kind of funny. And the children's book shows the 3 branches of the government, and the Supreme Court. For the Supreme Court, it said the Supreme Court teaches people about the law. And it's so funny because the Supreme Court doesn't teach people about the law. Nobody's like, oh, I'm gonna go read Citizens United and learn about the law. Nobody reads Supreme Court briefs except for lawyers. And so, you know, my proposal, and so I think someone on the call should do this, is I think Supreme Court briefs should do what I do whenever I want a client to read something. If I want a client to read a litigation hold letter, I do it in like blue font, 28 point, I do it in Comic Sans or something cool like that, and I make it understandable. And so I think that as lawyers, I learned that it's our job not only to sound smart, not only to interpret the law, not only to make precedent and, you know, maybe make change within the world, but it's also our job really to interpret the law for people who don't understand the law, for who aren't lawyers. We're conduits of the law to people who need to know more about the law. And then in my career, I see so many instances where people just are not able to access justice, and justice isn't done because of procedural hurdles or other things like that. And so, you know, that really shaped my worldview, because I realized that when you get a law degree, it's not just understanding the law and being able to make more money or benefit yourself or benefit your client. It's about benefiting the public. And that really has stuck with me. And the silver lining to that is that when I was in law school, I also met people that were so passionate about helping people. I see Barbara Bice on the call. Obviously, Supervisor Burke has been trailblazing, and Miss Lavine, you both have created foundations, and you both have created access to the legal profession for people who probably wouldn't be able to have that access normally. And, you know, the professors, the staff, people, everybody just kind of supporting people and supporting this idea that more people should understand the law was really the silver lining that I got, because I realized that there are people that care so much. You could go to, you know, big law, get a huge paycheck, never look back. But there are so many people that just decide not to do that because they really want to make the law more accessible for other people. And so at the end of the day, I was really inspired by my time in law school, by people like Shannon, who are, you know, changing the world one day at a time. And so I really appreciated that opportunity. And I think that I would encourage younger lawyers to recognize the responsibility that comes with the law degree.
Thank you so much. Ms. Singh, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Allie. That's a very nice thing to say. So I was going to say, I think two things come to mind from law school. Substantively, I just can't overstate how much I learned from, you know, our really world-renowned International Human Rights Law Clinic and its founding director, Hannah Gary, who remains a trusted mentor and friend today. She gave me the foundation substantively that I needed to enter this field. But more broadly, you know, I think one thing that I really took seriously away from law school was just that as attorneys, we're representing someone else. You know, this is an ethical obligation. This is a professional obligation that carries with it a huge amount of weight and responsibility. And I think that that concept has actually really helped, you know, improve my ability to do my job, particularly as a woman, because to the extent that you ever feel timid about standing up for yourself, or whether you have a right to be at a, you know, the table or the podium or whatever it is, you have to remember, actually, this is about someone else. And I've found that to be a really powerful tool anytime I need a boost, you know, that, well, I'm here on behalf of someone else, you know, another person or another group that needs to be represented. And that's particularly true, I think, in the context of international law, where you might be defending the rights, you know, speaking about the rights of a religious minority or an ethnic minority, or the LGBTQ population, or children's rights, or whatever. And that needs to be heard. And so I think, you know, to remember that you're representing someone else kind of can help us all to put aside our concerns or insecurities and do our job.
Thank you so much. We have another question for our panelists, which is, what are the obstacles that you feel that you faced in your respective careers, and how have you overcome them? And Supervisor Burke, would you mind taking this one first again? I believe you're still muted.
Well, my first obstacle was one of not having very much money and trying to go to law school. And I was very fortunate. I got a scholarship, and then I worked at Summers, and I was able to somehow put together the tuition to go to a great law school. But the obstacles that I faced of race, the obstacles of being a woman, even though we believe that those are all past, they're real still today. You know, when I think about the fact that I had the opportunity to work in the civil rights movement, to march with Dr. King, and to have a chance to be part of many of the changes. But those changes have not totally come about yet. So the obstacles that we see are real. They're obstacles that change people's lives. And we have a chance as lawyers, our unique position, to be at the forefront of change. To me, that's the exciting thing, that it's not always easy. And everyone doesn't have to be out marching. Everyone doesn't have to be a protester. But we have a chance often just to take a case that may change the future of life of many, many people for generations to come. And I believe that law is probably one of the most obvious and difficult methods that women can be involved in making change, but it is also the most effective. And things are better, but at the same, they're still the same. There's still many of the same obstacles that must be faced. I'm so impressed by international law and the kind of work that we see. One of the members of the panel here, who I just think that she is at the forefront of probably making so much in terms of the lives of so many people different, but each one of us in our own community, because unfortunately there's still bias, there's still challenges economically that many people face, that we have an opportunity to face some of those challenges head on and try to assist in opening doors. And one of the things that we see is today, everyone accepts women as lawyers. That was not my experience as I was coming along. But take advantage of that. Take advantage of the challenge and pass it on to a generation of younger people, that they can be involved in the political process, that they can change things, not just to talk about how bad things are, but how they can get together and change them. And I think that's one of the unique features of women who have been in the law.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Burke. Ms. Parker, we'll go to you next.
Sure. I mean, first I'd like to recognize that I probably haven't had as many obstacles as Supervisor Burke, and I am, very lucky to be very privileged. But it's funny because I still have imposter syndrome. I still, to this day, throughout my career, I've had imposter syndrome, still have it. I don't think that goes away. And I don't think that women are still totally accepted in the field of law. I think it might come across a little bit differently, maybe as a bias against being a mom, or, a bias against other aspects of being a woman. But I don't think that we're past that. I'm sad to say that. And I think that we're even maybe further behind when it comes to discrimination against people of color in the law, at least in my experience. And so I think that's the bad news. But the good news is that, I think a lot of people find great ways to deal with it. Personally, I've dealt with it by just, I think like Shannon was saying earlier, which was really interesting to me. She was saying that we really find our identity in our client. And so even if we don't have confidence in ourselves, we have confidence in our client. And so I will tell you that in my experience, when I have colleagues that are women, I see them sometimes, and this is a generalization, so it's not true for everybody, but sometimes unable to advocate for themselves. But then when I ask you to advocate for a client, or I ask you to advocate for another woman, whoa, nobody can stop you. And so when I was at Pillsbury, I suggested that we have women advocate for each other to get raises, because I can tell you reasons X, Y, and Z why my colleague needs a raise, why you're not paying her enough, why she's not being promoted, why this is ridiculous. But when it comes down to me, I struggle with that. I struggle with being confrontational. And it's something that I've worked on, and I think I've definitely gotten better at, but especially in the beginning of my career, it was very difficult for me to demand a pay raise, demand a promotion. When I went to Japan, I came back and I had to negotiate my salary. And that was very difficult for me as a fourth-year attorney, because I felt that when people said, oh, well, you were in Japan for 2 years as in-house counsel, you weren't practicing litigation, why should we pay you as a fourth-year litigator? That was really difficult for me to come back with a reason. And now, it's kind of funny, I've been practicing for a little bit longer, so now I can tell you, well, actually, this and this and this. But at the time, if I was advocating for my colleague, I would have told you reasons, 1 through 24, why you should pay Allie Parker what she deserves to be paid as a fourth-year litigator, because she has all this experience.
Excuse me, Allie.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No problem. I hate to interrupt you, but we've got a guest that has just joined us. And so, Dean Guzman, would you like to introduce our special guest?
I would be delighted to. Thank you, Chloe. So when we all went remote at USC, one of the challenges that had to be overcome was Zoom bombing. But it turns out Zoom bombing is not always a bad thing. So today I'm delighted to introduce our Zoom bomber, who is the 12th president of the University of Southern California, Dr. Carol Full.
Thank you for welcoming the Zoom bomber of the day for the most wonderful celebration that I can possibly imagine, being here with all of you to join Dean Guzman and all of you on this special celebration for Ruth Levine. I can't, there's no place I would rather be than right here as part of this wonderful celebration. You know, the Gould School has such a terrific history. Since its founding in 1900, the school's been defined by the achievements of so many extraordinary women graduates. Even a partial list, I think you all know, is pretty remarkable. There's Dorothy Nelson, the first female dean of an ABA accredited law school, and now US Ninth Circuit Court Appeals senior judge. There's Nora Manella and Alice Marie Stotler, both of whom became district attorney for LA County, and Yvonne Braithwaite Burke, a former LA supervisor and member of Congress, who I know is joining everybody here today. It's a very inspiring list, and I love learning about our wonderful alumna. Now to this list, of course, we're adding generations and generations of women who are graduating from Gould and building distinguished careers and living lives filled with terrific purpose. And among those, of course, is Ruth Levine. Her professional life has been marked by values that everybody can admire: dedication, passion, and most of all, integrity. Her professional life shows all that in so many ways. She served as the president of the Women's Lawyers Association of Los Angeles and was a long-term member of the Chancery Club, which advances civic and philanthropic work. And she, I understand, is still a card-carrying member of the California Bar Association. Her life has been also filled with love, having raised 2 children with her late husband, Superior Court Judge Richard Levine. Ruth created an endowed scholarship to honor his memory. And of course, this scholarship is helping generations of Gould students realize their own dreams. Ruth, today's celebration is so well deserved. It's fabulous to see you. You look terrific. It's great to see you here. It's a pleasure to join all of you in wishing you a happy 100th birthday. Woo! That's really, really wonderful. We're thinking about you today, and your USC Trojan family is sending you a big, warm, loving hug. Happy birthday.
Ruth, did you want to say anything?
Yes, I would love to say something. Thank you. And I want to say I am so happy that I lived to be 100 years old. And I could see USC doing what we always hoped they would. But it is a very different school than when I started there. And with our new president, it's even better. And thank you for being here, and good luck for your tenure here at USC.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Fold. We love you, and we are certainly appreciative of all that you're doing for the university. You're probably the hardest working woman on campus.
I don't know. There's lots of hard workers out there right now.
Well, and we know that you have another event that you've got to rush to, and so we certainly, again, appreciate you coming in and being a good Zoom bomber today for us.
Right. So maybe we'll all fight on together.
There we go.
Fight on, everybody. And vote on.
Vote on.
Bye.
All right. So I have opened up the chat box, of course, for questions for the panelists, and I have received one. And Allie, I so apologize having to interrupt you during the middle of your statement there. So first, let me go back to you and see if you had anything else that you wanted to add.
Well, it was a very important statement, Dean Reed. I was about to say something extremely brilliant.
I know you were.
When I was interrupted, it slipped my mind. So I'll pass it over to Shannon.
All right. So I do want to make sure that we're able to answer some of the questions from the audience, and I do have one, and so if there are others that come through, then certainly feel free to do so. But one that we received is for all the panelists is, other than family, what is your proudest professional accomplishment? Shall we start with you, Shannon, or are you still contemplating?
I'll start. Other than family, because I think that's a big caveat. I would say my family has been a huge part of what I'm proud of, especially in a field like law, where I think it can be difficult to balance work and family commitments, particularly. But other than family, you know, I really think there's a certain rigidity about the paths, you know, that are available in the field of law that is simultaneously not very useful for women and for people trying to move into international law. And, you know, I think the vast majority of people graduating from all law schools are kind of funneled towards a law firm track. And within that, you know, a fairly strict hierarchical ladder towards a partnership track, you know, and Allie mentioned that, you know, it could be easy to kind of take that paycheck and never look back. And I think that that's been pretty conclusively shown to be not a great model for women, for minorities. And it's a conceptualization of success that I think really cuts off a lot of the breadth of the field of law, you know, and I think what I'm proud of is that partway through my career, I had to kind of have a sit down talk with myself about how I was going to define success. And I think, as you know, many of us in the field of law are kind of type A personalities that want to be seen as successful and you know, fit this external model. And I think that to try to step off that path, to step off, you know, the more traditional track towards a traditional view of success, and define it for myself and what was going to be important to me, what I wanted to focus my time on, the kind of person and lawyer and mother and wife that I wanted to be, is something that I'm really proud of. And I really respect a lot of the women, both here and other USC law grads, who have tried to do that for themselves too. And everybody's going to define that differently, but it's always a difficult question to answer.
But you did a very nice job at it, so thank you. Supervisor Burke, would you like to respond?
Well, first on the family score, I know that we all have a lot of guilt in terms of our children when we're working hard and can't always be there. In my case, it was a matter of dragging a child across country from Los Angeles to Washington during the week. But I'm, you know, and I'm very pleased that somehow, even though my daughter complained a lot, she decided to go into the legislature. She now serves in the assembly. She's not a lawyer, but she is involved and has an excellent career in the California legislature, and some of the things that she has developed and contributions that she has made and new ideas, particularly as she talks about opening up financial opportunities for those who don't have those opportunities today. But also we have to recognize there's never been a woman president of the United States, even though other countries have women who are presidents. We've never had a woman governor of California, those of us as we sit here. So public service, I know, is one that's not always as attractive to lawyers who have a chance to go into affluent positions, law firms where they make a lot of money and have opportunities there today. But I would like to at least put in some kind of a pitch for there is still a need for women and lawyers in public service and those areas that can make a difference, because we bring a unique experience. No matter how different it is that we're moving upward, we still have the unique description often of raising children and bringing to our profession that experience. So I've never been embarrassed by the fact that maybe I, as a woman, had different experiences than the men did. In terms of, I know that sometimes in Congress, the men who would say, particularly when I was pregnant in Congress and having a child there, some of them thought, well, I don't know whether you should really be here. Shouldn't you be at home? Well, today, that does not exist particularly. But, you know, the battle is just half won. We still have so many things to achieve. And I'm very proud of these women who are moving forward in all these new areas. You know, Shannon, when you talk about international law, that's where there's going to be so much change and so many things that are going on. So we have to put a shout out to say, not be afraid to go into maybe a profession that doesn't make quite as much money as it does when you're a partner in a major law firm. Maybe some of those that cannot offer to you the kind of stability in terms of your lifestyle. But part of the challenge we have is to take some of those chances.
Thank you. So I've got another question from the audience, and it is, what advice do the esteemed women on the panel have for men to be better allies?
Well, if no one else will say it, I'll say it.
Jump right in there.
Well, men can be allies in terms of some of our issues. Let's start with that. It makes a lot of difference when we have men who are willing to say, yes, we do need more women who are moving up into positions that are competitive to men in my area of politics. Certainly, I listen to that, and we just recently had an experience in terms of judiciary. You know, as far as selection of women to go into the judiciary, of course, the person who we recently seen confirmed might have had many issues that were raised, but I'm glad at least that one of those issues was not that she was a woman with children going into the judiciary. So no matter how much you disagree, she's not the first one I disagreed with in some of her positions, but I had to say that at least we found an acceptance of the fact that you had someone with children who was willing, and the male role that she tried to emphasize was that her husband takes on a lot of the responsibility. And that's the reality of life. As you move into certain positions that are challenging, we have to look at men to work with us, cooperate, and be willing to allow us to take positions that they may have thought were obviously ones that men should enjoy. So hopefully that should not be something we talk about at this day and time.
Hopefully. Let's see here. Allie or Shannon, do either of you want to respond to that one?
Sure. I just think it's important to be allies. I think women have a lot of stuff on their plate already. And so it's difficult to, deal with unconscious bias, deal with just generally, child raising expectations, responsibilities if you do have a family, and then to be the face of how to be a successful woman in a law firm or in where I work in a governmental agency. I just think that's too much. So I have the same criticism of organizations in companies where they have like the 3 Black associates be the Black Associates Committee. And then they're like, all right, you're gonna be in every picture. You're gonna figure out how to eliminate racism. You're gonna figure out, how to portray this firm as very, diverse, et cetera, et cetera. I think that it should be the white presenting people doing that. And I think that it should be the men advocating for women's rights.
Absolutely.
Very good. Shannon, did you want to respond?
Sure. Yeah. 2 things come to mind. One, I think, well, first, I love the question. I think it's important to just look for opportunities. But number one, I think men should be looking for opportunities to elevate women's voices. That could be in a conference. It could be on a panel. One thing that I love is, there's this trend of men, not agreeing to speak on panels unless it includes women's voices. So really trying to elevate the voices of women around you. And the second, just to kind of echo even what Ali said, on a more interpersonal level, for all those men who are partners to women, I think there is enormous opportunity to just support the women in your lives who are facing their own challenges. And I think really behind a lot of success that you see both on the part of men and women, it takes a partnership behind it. And I know that the late, great Ruth Bader Ginsburg said the same thing about her husband, that she could have never accomplished all that she did, without the support of her husband. And I certainly feel it's true of me. I married a USC law grad who is taking care of our 2-year-old as we speak. And it is really, I could not be the attorney that I would want to be or parent the way that I want if we didn't kind of conceptualize our roles and divide our responsibilities in a way that is often, very, very equitable and look at it as a partnership. So I think you can support the women in your lives on a much smaller scale, as well as the grand gestures.
Excellent.
It looks like we have another question from the audience, which is, if you could give one piece of practical advice for women starting their career in the law, what would it be? And Supervisor Burke, can you start us off again?
If there is one piece of advice I would say is to select the area of law, whether or not it's going into a partnership, a law firm, government. Select an area that you think will help you grow. At the same time, realizing you won't stay there necessarily for your entire career, but look at all of the opportunities, corporate, maybe it's a law firm, maybe it's government, maybe it's political. There are so many different areas, but I think the first step is to take one where you believe you can grow, that you can make a contribution, and it does not have to be for life. I think that's one of the things that some people are afraid to do, to take a position, because they think once I get there, I'll never be able to do anything else. That's not true. In government, in a public defender's office or attorney general's office, that experience you then can use, you move into a different area, possibly in a private law firm or a major law firm. So what I find many young people entering the legal profession feel that they make a decision that's going to hold them for the rest of their career. Most of us do many different things during our career, and don't be afraid to make changes. Of course, maybe I've made too many changes, and sometimes they were good, sometimes they didn't do so well, but don't be afraid. And don't think that because you make a decision, it's for life. You'll have many different opportunities, and some you've never heard of yet, some that don't even exist yet, because law is so dynamic that opportunities will arise that you can't even conceive of at this moment. And lots of luck.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Burke. That's incredible insight. I want to give Ali or Shannon an opportunity to respond to this question as well.
Sure, I'll start if that's all right, Shannon. So I think that the one piece of advice that's really benefited me is to stick your neck out, to really trust yourself, trust your gut, and people trust lawyers. So you're going to have a lot of influence when you get your law degree. Use it for good and stick your neck out. The three things that I'm probably most proud of in my career, I've done 2 of them under threat of lawsuit. And so I'll give you a brief description. The first time I was in Japan, I had a woman who had complained of sexual harassment, and she actually filed the first sexual harassment lawsuit in Japan under Japanese law. And we wanted her to come talk at the American Chamber of Commerce in Japan. Everybody at the ACCJ saying, no, we're getting these like letters from big firms saying that they're going to sue us. She can't speak here. She's going to defame somebody. So we worked so hard to make sure she had no defamatory content in her speech, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the most proud I've ever been, that got so much news coverage, and it really broadened the issue of sexual harassment in Japan. And I couldn't be happier for her. I was able to support somebody who is Japanese in, really helping her country move along. The second time was when I convinced my firm to let me take on an asylum case, and they were saying, you don't have hours for that, et cetera, et cetera. But we were successful in securing asylum for a woman that probably would be dead right now if she didn't get it. And then the third time was when I branched out with another alumni of USC Law School when she was starting the Immigrant Defenders Law Center. And we started that again under threat of suit by her former employee, saying that we were intentionally interfering with business conduct. Nothing ever came of it, thank goodness. But now it's grown to be the largest deportation defense provider in Southern California. And so, 2 USC alumni doing this and under threat of lawsuit. And so I would say, if you doubt yourself, stop, listen to your instinct, trust yourself, and do things even if people are sending you lawsuits or threats of lawsuits.
Thank you, Allie. And Shannon, can you take it away?
Yes, I think one piece of advice that's really worked for me, which I actually heard when I was a student from a female icon in the international law field, is whatever you love, become an expert. And I really like that advice for 2 main reasons. Generally, as a person, I like this advice because I am just a better lawyer and a better employee when I care about what I'm doing. So I jumped on this advice to kind of legitimize my natural impulse to dig deep into the work I wanted to do. But as a woman, I really like this advice because I think a drive to be an expert in something has also helped me kind of distinguish myself in a field where, for example, I might not get an opportunity because, I'm the one out, I don't know, playing golf with a bunch of male partners, or having a beer, or, having a bunch of predominantly male attorneys recognize themselves in me. But I might get an opportunity because I have really tried to distinguish myself, in a specific niche area. So I think it kind of goes alongside looking to set yourself apart rather than try to fit in to a mold or stereotype. And so, if you're an expert in something, it's easier to really be recognized for your mind and your abilities and your credentials.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Okay. So before we conclude, I wanted to see, Ruth, did you want to respond to that question in terms of any advice that you'd like to give our students? I know we're. Okay. Did you?
Early in your career, get some mentor that gives you good judgment when you start practicing law. I think that makes a lot of difference in later life, no matter what you take up. And I also wanted to talk about my husband, because he was very helpful when we had children, and he did all the things to make it possible for me to exist what I wanted, and I did the same for him. And I think, because the marriage needs to be a partnership anyway, and so I think that I think the modern family is much better at that than we were when my husband and I were growing up. But I think that's important.
Excellent. Well, Ruth, on that comment regarding mentorship, there is someone in the audience who claims you as their mentor for the past 49 years, Jill Robbins. And she made a note of that to me in the comments. So Jill, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure you've been blessed to have Ruth as your mentor, certainly for all those years.
Beyond blessed, beyond.
Excuse me?
Beyond blessed.
Okay. Yeah, Jill was my substitute daughter when my daughter got married and moved to New York. And Jill was one of 2 substitute daughters that I have.
Substitute daughter, I like that. All right, Dean Guzman, would you have any final comments for us before I close this out?
Just thank you to everybody. I want to thank and congratulate our students, Samantha Dyer, Morgan Brock-Smith, and Aaron Jocelyn, I'm sorry, for the terrific job you've all done in guiding us through this. Thank you, Shahoy, and thank you to all of our panelists. For what it's worth, it's not only women who are inspired by these stories. And so I count myself among those who are moved by the experiences you all have, and thank you all for helping me in that way.
Thank you so much. And I too want to thank our guests for sharing their experiences with us today. We appreciate all of your service. We applaud your accomplishments, and we certainly commend your indomitable spirit for being such phenomenal women. Thank you, Ruth, for allowing me to be able to do this for you and for the law school to support you in this way. And thank you for being such a stalwart supporter of our beloved law school. I'd like to leave with a final quote from the extraordinary poet, Maya Angelou. "I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the water to create many ripples." The women here today have in their own ways made changes in our world for many nameless and faceless people with the ripples that they've created. So thanks everyone for coming today. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. And again, if you want to leave a note for Ruth in the chat, you can certainly feel free to do so. We'll leave it open for a little while, a few minutes. But again, thanks everybody for coming, and we love you, Ruth. And Ruth, I think you've got actually one last thing that you wanted to share with everybody. Don't you have a little piece of paper?
Yeah, that's one.
There we go.
Can you see that?
We got it. That's beautiful. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you for everything.